Alrighty, well, on behalf of Arnold, I would like to welcome everyone to this event. Thank you so much for joining us to have a discussion about smart strategies, stepping up our game as agencies. Funny story, Francis and I, we separately reached out to Amanda, as she says, because we were both yearning to come together as business development professionals. 2016 was a challenging year, and we both kind of wanted to discuss challenges, successes, and solutions to be and do better. And here we are. So I'd like to take a moment to thank She Says, because of them we are here today. We brought together this amazing panel. And as you know, She Says' mission is to advance women in the creative industry. So we're really thankful for Amanda and Ale.
So I'm Amanda. I see a lot of familiar faces. I also see a lot of new faces. So welcome if this is your first She Says event. We have a special year this year. This is our 10-year anniversary. So Ale is one of the co-founders. Because She Says was actually started across the pond in London in 2007. So what started out as a group of 5 women meeting quite regularly is now probably, how many chapters we have now? 30 chapters?
I don't know, I stopped counting.
Yeah, 30 chapters globally. And basically through word of mouth and participation. And the whole purpose of She Says was really to support women within the digital advertising and marketing space. And we've done that. So I would say that we were the first to do a lot of these things, and given our current political climate, it's probably the best time to be around and really, do the best that we can this year. We're not bra burners, so that's one thing you guys need to know. We're not bra burners. We're not there to make sure,
right,
companies
Kwame.
Kwame gives us the love.
Apologize for all the men.
So, we're not there to set policies, but we're there to make women feel empowered that they can achieve what they want to achieve as long as they put their minds to it and they surround themselves with people that are going to support them throughout their careers. So instead of calling us She Says, we should be called She Does.
Yeah. Nice segue. So really quickly, I'm going to keep it mysterious, but we're planning like a big event this year because we are 10 years. And I'm only going to say 2 things right now. First, it's not going to be a conference, it's going to be an experience. People are not going to come and sit and listen, they're going to do something. And they're going to do something for the next generation of women out there. So that's all I'm saying for now, but we are planning an event towards the fall. So keep your eyes peeled.
So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Frances Crocker from Work & Co. She's going to be moderating tonight's event, and we'll introduce the panel to you now. So enjoy.
We have a few more seats, guys, if you don't want us, guys. You're all welcome. You can sit down with us.
The ladies don't bite.
They're so chivalrous, but there are. So if you want some seats, there's a few. So I'll give you a moment if you feel like filling in. There's some seats over here. We're really nice, right? Yeah. Usually it's the women who don't. Super nice. So we have an amazing panel of folks tonight. We really wanted to get the best and the brightest and a good sampling of people who have an interesting and unique perspective on new business in the agency world. So we have Kwame Taylor Hafer down at the end. He is a managing director at Chobani. So he's our resident client on the panel tonight. So we're all going to have tons of questions for him and want to pick his brain. So apologies right now. Next, we have Simone Oppenheimer. She's the Director of Business Development North America for Ogilvy. Ogilvy Mather, sorry, full name. You guys know, that agency, you might have heard of them. They're called Ogilvy. Next, we have Lindsay Slavey. She's the founder and strategic marketing consultant at Sunday Dinner. And so she is really kind of mixing up the search consulting world and creating a new model that we all can kind of get behind and is more exciting than the old one. And last but absolutely not least is Laura Carenti. She's EVP Managing Director Media at Giant Spoon. And I'm Frances Crocker. I am Director of New Business at Work & Co. We are a digital product agency over there in Brooklyn. So we have a great diverse panel of full service media, digital clients, consultants. So To start off, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Lindsay, but since you...
I have notes.
I know, maybe she might have already been prepared for this question, but it would be really awesome if you could give us just an overview of the new business landscape, the agency landscape, to put everything in context tonight.
Sure. So thank you for having me, and there's a lot of familiar faces in agencies I work with in the room, so it's nice to see you guys. But for those who don't know what my company does, Sunday Dinner, and I've worked agency side for a long time. About 3 years ago I started Sunday Dinner, and we do some agency consulting around positioning, but our main focus is brand side, and we really focus on helping brands navigate how to work with the best and brightest, whether that's new agencies that they might bring on board, activating their current agencies or internal teams in different ways, and just kind of how to be a modern marketer. So I thought to give kind of a setup in terms of landscape, it would be nice to think about, if we were in the shoes of the buyer, right? This is a new business discussion, and you guys are the sellers. So what are the brands really out there looking for today, and what are they dealing with on a day-to-day basis? I have the privilege of sitting inside some of the, my clients are normally procurement agency, with procurement is a dirty word, so agency relationships, or very C-level marketers, and they're really just tasked with figuring out resourcing, right? If you think about it from that simple perspective, it's really new projects are hitting their desk every day, and they're trying to figure out from this vast landscape, like, how do I resource this to get it done? So I have an internal team which is growing, right? We all know that that's what's going on. I have a roster of agencies I'm trying to activate, and then I have a ton of gaps. There's all these new things that I need to really deal with and how I source that. So I think there's kind of three main things that a person in that position is dealing with right now. So one, the type of work has changed. We all know that. No longer is the ask that's coming to their doorstep like, I need to create a website or some banners or commercial or whatever. It's really freaking complicated. They don't know how to write the brief. They don't really understand like how to divvy up the different pieces of what is being asked of them and how to synthesize that. And I think that's square one, like right where anyone in that position is having a really hard time, just wrapping their heads around like, what the hell do I need to look for? What am I trying to make? Who do I need to go talk to? The second thing is this landscape of agencies is so confusing to them. I was talking to Laura yesterday, I think, on her podcast about the fact that one of the brands I work with, who all of us would love to work with, and they work with such creative agencies, to find new agencies, they literally go to Google. And they're like, content, production agency, New York. That's what I need. And yet, you guys have probably all called upon them, but they are so freaking busy. They have no idea, they don't remember, they don't have systems for tracking it. They only read what they read like in Campaign magazine and Ad Age and Creativity, and unfortunately, those are all big, big shops. And that no one that's smaller is really getting talked about, and they have no idea how to find you. So really important thing to think about in terms of being proactive. And then in terms of agencies, they also have, they have Maker, they have Facebook, they have CAA, they have Refinery 29 that's signing contracts to be agencies now, all freaking knocking on their door, and everyone wants a piece of this money. And it's a shoe-in to get to bigger media, etc. So there are a million different types of agencies, and literally at big places, they have a room, and it's siloed, right? So it's all the silos that match up to their marketing organization, which is like digital and social and whatever, and your logos are there, right? And now it's really confusing, like giant spoon, where do we put you? Your social and content and media, what place do they put you? So your job is really to think about, like, if these are the buckets and they're changing, how do I explain myself and how do I fit into the right place?
Yeah.
And then I think the third thing is really this new way of working. And I'm one of the biggest proponents of new ways of working. I mean, we help search in different ways, and we do a lot of interesting workshops to crack briefs, but I think that anyone in these positions, whether it's a C-level marketer or an agency procurement person, is hearing through press, through their agencies, and through their bosses, like, we need to work in a new way. And they're like, what in God's name does that mean? Do I need to, like, and it's risky, right? So is it, I'm paying people differently? Am I structuring my contracts? Am I bringing in tons of different agencies and then it's getting really confusing? Like, how am I working in a new way? So I think the one important thing, maybe to just set this up, in terms of new business, is so often I talk to agencies who forget to put themselves in the shoes of the person they're selling to, and how complicated that is. They want to work with you, but they don't really know where to put you and what's going on in their world. So being a valued partner and adding some support to what's going on the brand side, I think is just an informative thing to think about.
Awesome. That's perfect.
I didn't really look at my notes either.
Amazing. So that's a really great segue into, I think, especially your kind of conversation on the new way. Let's try to figure that out tonight. We're going to dig into some of those components of what that new way looks like. I mean, our goal here tonight is it's 2017. We're all setting resolutions. How can we do better? How can we get more business, or maybe different business? Maybe you want a different type of client, different type of projects. So we're going to dig into some strategies to help you do that. And whether you're actually in new business or working at an agency and hoping that your new business people are going to listen to some of these strategies, hopefully there's some good takeaways for tonight. So I think as new business professionals, like, a lot of our job is the hunt and the search process overall. So I thought we'd kick off the discussion specifically in talking about, what is this new way? How in 2017 are searches being conducted? How can we kind of adapt to the changes? I don't know who wants. Maybe I might put Simone on the spot here as a rep from a well-established large agency. Kind of how are searches being done for you? Have you seen changes?
Yes, so there's definitely a shift, right, in multiple ways. First, things are coming much more project-based, of course, right? So one thing that we have to get acclimated to as a larger agency that are used to AOR relationships is how do we become more of agency of relationship versus agency of record, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of investment into organic growth, because as projects become more popular, we have to rely on that relationship to continue those projects coming through, right? Because just like smaller agencies, right, that are more project-based, we have to understand that our reputation and our work just is relied on our last project, right? We're only as good as our last piece of work.
Yeah.
So that's a shift. In terms of how reviews are being handled, thankfully there are people like Lindsay that are shaking things up, right? And we see that definitely. And I'm seeing even in the past few years a shift from procurement, right, or agency relations, or how are they putting themselves, which is fine, becoming much more agency friendly, being much more adaptable, just like consultants are being. The ones that are kind of rising to the top and being more popular in terms of the reviews that are happening. So I'm seeing a lot of positive shifts, both in terms of agencies acclimating towards the change, as well as consultants and clients as well.
Kwame, from a client perspective, do you see the process changing, becoming less prescriptive?
Yeah, it's definitely changing a lot. And I think the way modern brands operate, and the way I think more legacy brands operate are starting to, in my mind, definitely move apart. So the silos you mentioned before very much exist in a lot of different brands. But as we're looking for ways to create new value, or looking for ways to maximize what we do, we're reinventing our approach to agencies, to relationships, and to sort of individuals that we might bring into the fold to help us make. I think in my mind there's an emphasis now on creative strategy and on production, because I do think there's a need to get out there. There's a need to get out there much more quickly, much more with much more specificity, and with much more craft in the execution. And for us at Chobani, having partners that can come to the table, buy into sort of our vision and our mission, buy into our values, and really build a relationship that is beneficial and that continues to, again, improve on what we do is really, really key. And I think the emphasis on moving quickly, getting out there, executing, learning, and ultimately iterating is top of mind.
Okay. Now, Laura, what about you? I know that you kind of have a stance of no RFPs. So how have searches changed for you?
Sure. So I love what Simone said about moving from agency of record to agency of relationship. And we were talking yesterday about the KPI in this business should be chemistry.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we forget that we're in a service industry that's built on relationships.
Yeah.
And I think when you sit down at the table, and Trevor, one of the co-founders of Giant Spoon, is here, would say we want to date before we marry.
Yeah.
And I like to liken that to Khloe Kardashian. It didn't work out for her when she jumped to the marriage part. So I think that this, it is good analogy, right? But in saying that, I truly think that one of the client that we had met recently, the CMO of an up and coming modern brand, said a lot of agencies were coming to the table and had their pitch.
Yeah.
But they weren't listening. He's like, instead of giving me your pitch of your full service model, give me the services I need right now.
Yeah.
And then we can grow into that. And I think a lot of people are coming for the full spectrum of what they have to offer, and they've been in this game long enough to know, like, we can deliver this, this, and this.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it just comes down to listening to what the client's needs are.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's actually the things they don't say, that if you're smart enough to read between the lines, you can understand how you can actually bring value and utility in ways that they weren't even looking for. And that's how we see the opportunity to build and expand on that scope. So that's how we're going after it.
We definitely at Work & Co, we won one of our very first largest pitches. We won it, and afterwards the client said, we were very small at the time, and afterwards the client said that they awarded it to us because we didn't go in and say that we were full service. They're like, you were very clear that you were going to do this specific set of things for us, and you weren't going to be in here trying to upsell us, immediately on all this other work.
Sure.
And I'll also kind of say that, like, the best from a chemistry perspective, my favorite meetings are the ones where I never have to open my computer. Or maybe you're going to show some casework, but you're not going through these kind of canned presentations, because clients have seen the kind of dog and pony show before. So,
Sure.
Okay. Anything else? Any other thoughts on kind of the search process, guys?
Yeah, I mean, we just awarded. I've worked with you on projects with clients, and we just awarded Giant Spoon, pretty big, media account. I hate the word search, and I hate search agencies, and like MediaLink getting into this is making it real messy, and it's just very opportunistic. And I think that I've always been a matchmaker, and when I started my business, I was so adamant. I'm not a search consultant. I don't know what I hate. I hate that. But in the end, you put people together in the right way.
Yeah.
It's all about how you do it and how you follow through with it. I think it's, I consider my team to sort of be a secret weapon to CMOs, and what we're doing is really spending a lot of time nurturing the relationship ahead of time, getting to know you guys, setting things up, doing everything behind the scenes, knowing the brand, being just as educated as the CMO, hopefully, in the room in some ways, setting up the relationship, putting everyone together, and not just walking away. I'm still on our project right now, I'm still in the key reviews. I'm still making sure that work is a part of it. I'm still on the process. And I think that's, where you can offer value when you're putting people together, is to continue down the line to make sure that really big first thing gets out the door. But search, it's a little bit of a mess. I mean, we awarded our Mass Mutual was the client we just worked on, and we awarded 24 hours after meeting the agencies, and it was an hour-and-a-half meeting that each of them had. You guys, sorry, had to wait a little longer. But then we got the creative agency, and then immediately, we'd only talked to one media company. We brought them in and said, you guys are going to have to play nice together. If you don't get along, this isn't successful, so let's make sure that they're a part of that process.
Yeah, I think Lindsay's being modest and saying how effective her approach is.
Yeah.
I think when you've got consultants that don't have a stake in the business other than making sure that people are coming to the table and having a working relationship that's going to go beyond project or job one is really important. And I think the process that you've taken from 6 months to 24 hours in some instances is something that we should all be paying attention to. Clients want to get to the work. And to sit in behind a bureaucratic process. I mean, I don't know how many of you have been in new business pitches, but when you're looking out into the sea of clients that sit around the table, I can't say it's like the most exciting thing. Unless, people. I mean, you can talk to you go through you
come
sit
from
there.
our world.
I can totally relate to this conversation. Up until 3 months ago, I was an agency guy. I'd been my whole career. And I think from my perspective, a lot's changing client side in that you're getting a lot of people who have a background and who spend a lot of time in agencies moving to clients. And I think what that does is it brings an appreciation for the sort of pitch process and the theater that happens. I think generally everyone's on their best behavior during a pitch. And then you actually get into the project and it's a complete nightmare. So I think it's important for us to, as clients, understand that the nature of the relationship at the onset needs to be created in a context that's as honest as possible. So everyone's transparent, everyone's at the table with their true intentions. And you go through working on, ideally, one initiative that you prove yourselves on.
Yeah.
And then I think the value of the relationship shows through.
That's right.
We at Shivani have spent quite a lot of time talking about the kinds of agencies that we feel are a good cultural fit for us. You know, knowing and understanding that we're a bit intense at times, things are a little bit crazy, a lot of things change. But you need someone who appreciates, understands, respects that culture, and kind of mirror it in the way that they work. So I think to your point about matchmaking, it's really key that you get beyond the nuts and bolts of specific deliverables and get more into the cultural aspects of, you know, starting a relationship together.
So kind of going back to the matchmaking component, there's some new tools like Globality and Agency Spotter, these new online databases that are trying to make it easier for clients to find partners globally. Are they going to be successful? Because they can't offer the kind of relationship building and the transparency. So where do they fit in? And as agencies and brands, like, do we embrace it? Do we kind of stay away? Anyone have any thoughts on? I don't know. I'm sure Lindsay has. I know she might have it.
I mean, again, I've sat with a lot of clients who get so many inbound emails of agencies, and they want to respond, they want to figure out where to organize it, and then you're like, great, we're going to build a CRM and start working on that, and that never happens. You know, and then it's like it doesn't happen. They never check it out. I mean, I think it's nice to have everything organized, but those are pay-for-play models on both sides of the fence, and it is technology, and this business needs to be more about human connection and relationships and partnerships, and it is getting us away from that. So I don't know, you know, it's just not really, it's not the first place I would start to kind of, maybe as a quick database check, but I don't know, and it's becoming expensive, I think, too, right?
Yeah.
So
I think, you know, I agree, the human touch is really important, but I think the tools are only as good as the people using them.
yeah.
That's right.
So if you're not as well versed or informed about what's going on out there, you're going to look in those tools and you'll find a partner that may not necessarily be the right fit for the kind of work you want to do or the kind of culture that you are.
How many people got awarded a job because they were on some new database?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really about, again, having those relationships, investing in those relationships. And I also want to say, I grew up in a small agency. Someone here, Caitlin, I worked with her back in the day there too. And I love hearing that search consultants are getting in the weeds and forcing themselves to understand the benefits of these agencies that are not, their names are not out there on Ad Age all the time, or have those relationships that I've had for years, or they feel like, everyone is calling them up, and there's something to be said, because I know there's a lot of people in the audience, and I'm glad that we've come to a time where they've realized that brands, and I have to give you guys the credit because you're asking for it, and you're demanding it, and you're hiring it, or you're questioning, or you're calling, or taking meetings, and it's forcing the industry to pay attention. And as we are moving into project base, who's more adaptable or more open to working in new ways than you guys? And I'm saying that because I just spoke to a few of you who are coming from that background in those places right now, and so I'm confident and I'm excited that we're moving there and we're investing as an industry in those places.
I think it's also cross-functional learning too. Lindsay puts out twice a year, the Slavey annual report, but it's really Sunday dinner, about like top 10 agencies to watch. And there were a few people that were on there that I didn't know about, but after doing some homework and just the education process of knowing your neighbor, and there may be certain projects come up where these may be people you end up being in a room with, or that you want to be in a room with, and understanding where the industry is moving and the new capabilities and functionality that people are bringing to the market. So it's not just always about client prospecting, it's also about understanding not just your competitive set, but your future partner set. And I think that by Lindsay going in and scraping what's going on outside of maybe the big 5 holding companies, it's interesting to see people taking that on. So thanks.
So we've heard that searches are changing, it's becoming more relationship based. So you establish a connection, you're going to get an opportunity. Now comes the dreaded RFP. We all hate them. I mean, I hate them because I have to respond to them. I sometimes feel like people sit around and they think of all the ways you can torture someone with these ridiculous questions. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how RFPs are changing, and what is the role of RFPs? they're very valuable for communicating what the scope of the engagement is. But sometimes you can get that by having a meeting. And or you can help often we'll help the client write an RFP because they just don't have one. And we start asking questions and it kind of leads in that direction. So, what is the role of RFPs? We're not going to get rid of them completely. But, for 2017, what can we do with them? Do we have to respond to them? We can talk all night about yes, we do have to respond. How do I respond to fewer RFPs is my goal for 2017. I want the 24-hour pitches.
In person, respond to them in person.
Oh,
don't write it.
I've never tried that approach.
Just turn up.
Yeah. Sarcasm, a little sarcasm.
Yeah.
From my perspective, the RFP is about, I think, really two things. How do you think and how do you work? And are those two things compatible with us? Because I think it's very rare that you go through an RFP process and you come out on the other end with like the final campaign or the final idea. It's to the conversation we had a few minutes ago, it's about the relationship. It's about how we can collaborate to ideally get there. And do we have enough chemistry? Do we have enough understanding of who we are and what we do? Do we have enough depth of experience in the specific task that's being requested? I think to me it's answering really those two questions. Yeah.
I don't think as an industry, as a agency, creative agency industry, we've done enough to say we're not doing that anymore. Sorry, we have not moved how we work with clients or how we present ourselves to demand the change.
Yeah.
So people say, okay, well, I'm not filling that RFI, or I'm not giving them spec work. Okay, so what are you going to do? How are you going to differentiate yourself? Let's move the industry. But I have not heard anyone raise their hand with an idea that's different yet challenges us. So I would put the onus on us instead, because I think there are brands out there and consultants out there that would be open to that change. I think that we have to look at ourselves and say we have not moved in how we present ourselves or differentiate ourselves enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of I'll play kind of the other side. There's a lot of we don't respond to RFPs. It almost just becomes aloof. I'm like, okay, cool, moving on. Like, you're not a part of this process, but what you could say is we would prefer to answer this by conducting a 4-hour workshop with your client. Mm-hmm. We're going to do some homework on you. We're going to come with some initial thinking or ways of working and take a key question and work that out together, because that's just how we're going to get to it. It doesn't answer the question per se,
yeah,
but it starts to get people to learn. I can't imagine a brand saying, oh no, we don't want to do that. That's something we don't want to do. Of course they'd love to do that. I do think there's typical RFI questions you just got to ask and fill in, like, are you under investigation? I had to ask that. Yeah, in this case.
You don't have to answer that anymore, actually.
Are you going to sell soon? There's some weird stuff going on right now. Are you part of this? But other than that, I think if we can write RFPs better, just like as consultants and on the brand side, I just try to talk to, and Annie's really helped me with this last pitch, and we were just trying to get to the heart of our CMO, like, what are you going to be measured on? Like, what gets you bonus? What makes you happy? What moves you forward? And that's just what we need to make sure that these agencies deliver on.
Yeah.
That question.
Yeah, I'd love to give my perspective when you say no RFPs, and not relative to new business, but I came up through the media world, and 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, why are we doing this? You're sending RFPs out as a media planner or buyer, and you're getting back these off-the-shelf proposals. And I've worked with the GE business for quite a long time, and Linda Boff was the CMO of GE, felt the same way. And we went out and kind of championed the stance, and she went in so far as to publicly say a couple years ago, we're not doing this. Mm-hmm. If you want to work with us, come and understand my business, learn the way we work, and then we'll figure out how to build a partnership together. And so I see that carrying over in the new business world, because it's the same thing. A lot of times the RFPs come in through certain search consultant direct, and they're blanket RFPs. Yeah. They're questions that don't get to the heart of what it is that makes Giant Spoon or Ogilvy uniquely our own. And so we always take an approach as we'll answer those questions, but we're going to answer them through the questions. We're going to filter them through the lens of Giant Spoon. And so you might not get your word for word response. But you will understand how we're going to partner. And so I think the more we can, to your point, resist that very conventional approach to doing business, I think the more creative the agency could be, because I think the RFP process just strips creativity on multiple sides of the table.
But just to add to that, because I agree, as a creative agency, we should be able to look at something that might look like the Yellow Pages and be able to make it shoot out like a rainbow, right? That's our job, is to make everything look beautiful, funny, catch attention. And so if we see something that's obviously not coming from you, but is a really like white piece of paper with some boring questions, it's our job to infuse some humor or personality into it so you want to read it. I mean, that's the job of creative agencies, right?
Yeah.
So it's on us to do that. And so that's what I challenge us with as an agency and as a team.
Yeah. I'll quickly say in defense of the clients here, we don't love receiving pitches either. Like it's unfortunately become a bit of a standard. And I think about how we work with Giovanni, and we're moving away from that. A lot of it is curation. Knowing enough about what's going on in the agency world to go out and find a partner that we think can help deliver whatever solution we need. And we try it. It's a project. If it's great, awesome. If it's not, we move on. So I think increasingly clients are doing that. And I think it's very useful, I imagine, to the group up here.
Yeah. I just hate when I get an RFP and I'm like, I've seen this exact RFP and they got it off the internet somewhere. Like I'm like,
it's like from the 4As.
And they're terrible questions. And they're just going to open the budget page eventually. I mean, right?
And they don't tell you how much it costs. Oh, sorry, I cannot stand, if you don't want to tell me how much money you have to spend on something, then I cannot answer this for you.
That's a really big challenge. I mean, I try with every client to get them to give me a number.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we would really like you to give us a range, and so then I start playing the ballpark game, and I was like, well, there's like the really nice, the brand new ballpark that was just built, or are we looking at like the one from 20 years ago? So I start giving them some ballpark ranges, and then that gets them to finally give a number. But I would love to hear some strategies for getting the number out of a client, because why are we wasting our time on leads that really don't meet? Like if you have a minimum, or if they only have $1 million, like let's not go in and pitching 2.5.
One of my clients went to you guys without talking to me before, and they gave you guys an RFP, no budget on it. I'm like, you better put a budget on this. Like, we're not. They came back, and you guys were higher than they had anticipated. They're like, what do we do? I'm like, well, you should have told them.
We would have totally got that. We're very direct. We're very direct about numbers.
I think it's very rare that an initiative would be greenlit at a brand without a budget attached.
Yeah,
of course.
But it does happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's something interesting you want to do.
They kind of know.
You're not quite sure what that's going to cost, or to be honest, if you even want to sort of restrict the creativity that might come back.
Yeah.
So in rare instances, you will put something out just to get a sense for the range, and then you'll advocate for the money internally to make it happen. So I think it can happen, but it should be rare.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think like for our business in particular, we're a business that puts ideas at the center. And so oftentimes you want somebody to buy into the idea. The stuff that goes around it to make it happen should be flexible and fluid.
Yeah.
So I think, while yes, it would be nice to have the number, you like to think that the idea you put in front of a client is what they're aiming for, and then you figure out the way to make it work.
Yeah.
So sometimes I say, and when I agree with you, especially when I was working in smaller shops, and it's a nice tool to even utilize now, is I say, well, I want to put something in front of you that you can buy.
Yeah.
And that sometimes changes. I don't want to put something in front of you, and then you put that in front of
Your boss.
your boss and your team, and they'd be like, and then they're like, well, I can't buy that.
Yeah.
So what? That was a waste of everyone's time. So I just want to present you something that you can buy,
Try to make
and that has worked
Yeah.
in the future,
Yeah.
in the past, maybe in the future too. That has worked in the past.
I had a client once, this was on like a very introductory new business call, and he was like, if Work & Co was a car, what kind of car would you guys be? I was like, oh shit. He was like, I forget, it was like, are you a Jeep Grand Cherokee?
Oh my God.
Or like a BMW or a Porsche?
That's when you hop on Facebook.
They're like, in terms of
And I was like, we're a Tesla, I don't know.
our purpose or
Yeah, exactly, like
capabilities.
quality, performance.
Longevity.
Yeah, like what
Our
are we?
soul is a Porsche.
So I went back to our leadership team afterwards, and I was like, guys, we have to figure out what kind of car we are. I don't really know how you would have. It was a really fun fun. I mean, go back to your teams. Talk about what kind of car you are. It does kind of raise some soul-searching questions. Of, are we a
We live in
BMW?
Manhattan. There is no car. What are you talking about?
We're flexible. We're an Uber.
We're an Uber. That's good.
Nimble and
Wow,
flexible.
that's terrible.
So while we're talking about money, let's talk about procurement. So I think, you know, as procurement got more and more involved in the new business process, I think there was a concern that we would just keep cost cutting and keep cost cutting. And I think something we're definitely seeing at Work & Co is that there are some clients out there that understand the value of investing, and they're not necessarily just making their decisions based on what's the lowest price I can get. But where are we going with procurement? What is the role of procurement, and maybe are we in a good place? Like, is it not as bad as everybody thought, perhaps?
I think you have to think of what procurement's dealing with right now. Like, they've been constantly, just one perspective, right? They've been constantly hit by marketers that they're driving prices down and they're all about efficiency. And so I think over the past 2 years, and I go to a lot of procurement conferences, sounds real sexy, but trust me, it's super interesting. And these are people that pay you. You want to make relationships with them. And they're like obsessed with trying to find creative agencies. And they're like, how do we get to know them and learn about them and like understand how they operate? Because I think they are trying to figure out like how to get more value from that relationship and how to play a bigger part in sort of the marketing selection sphere. So I see procurement ideally, you know, would move into two places where there's one, just sort of the people that process, you know, they're like, you know, Joe will take care of, get you in Ariba, and it'll be a nightmare, and then you have to pay, whatever, Ariba.
I want to redesign Ariba.
But I didn't really think of paying for Ariba. And then there's like these agency relationship people, and I kind of think of it as like the chief orchestrator that helps the agencies come together, and it's a scout, and someone you can go to that counsels you, and like Diageo has Peter Isaiah, if you guys don't know him, he's like been there for 15 years, and he's amazing. And he's there just to like think about new ways of working and talk to the marketers and introduce agencies and think about these things. And he's procurement, he's head of procurement, you know. And Target, big client of ours there, agency relationship team is like 9 people, I think. And they're all women, they're really an amazing bunch. But like they're focused on just making sure they have the best freaking talent and they know how to use them. So I would like to see that as
The interesting thing about Diageo and Target is that they're very project-based.
Yeah.
So it relies, but they invest in looking at a lot of agencies, which falls on that team, and they have to invest in relationships
and
beyond pricing.
Yeah, Microsoft's changed their way of working. So I don't know. I would hope that's the future, but I talk to procurement people like all day long, and they're trying. You know, I think they know they need to be a little bit better. But they're also looking for cheap ways of getting stuff done. I think they're investing in the idea portion. They want people who are like these two, Circus Maximus, big idea thinkers, and they're going to spend a lot of money on that. But when it comes to making something, they're more about like, okay, here's where we're going to figure out our costs. But we're still spending a lot of money in the upfront. That's what I'm saying.
To me, it's all about value, and value has nothing to do with hourly rates, or it's not always about money.
Yeah.
And I think if you are a strong strategic partner, if you're a strong creative partner, if you're a strong production partner, we will invest in maximizing value wherever that exists. So that's a conversation that we have a lot with all the different partners that we have around the table. And we're constantly looking for ways to unlock new opportunities for the brand and unlock new growth. And that's only going to come through maximizing the value you get from your partners. You know, and I think we take it out of the context of we move these line items here or there. It's not always about the dollars and cents. And I think how we engage with these relationships, how we define our working situation, and ultimately how we measure it. Because I think value to me has a lot to do with ROI. And I think very few brands spend time fully defining and outlining the KPIs and then measuring against those. So we're investing a lot more in that, more than like punching the numbers up front.
You totally teed me up. So I think that it's interesting when you talk about ROI. We talk a lot about how, I mean, we're an ideas-driven agency. So for us, it's you're not coming to Giant Spoon because you want the best rate card in town.
Yeah.
You're coming to Giant Spoon because you don't want to return your investment, you want to return impact, right? And what do those margins look like? And so it's really about changing the conversation from savings goals and efficiency to what is the value that I'm bringing you. And I might not get you 15 cents to the dollar on the best programmatic buy you can find, but I sure as shit am going to turn that dollar into 15 back in terms of earned value and going down that route. And so I just think it's a fascinating conversation because I think the agencies, a little bit of the onus falls on us, and I've come from a holding company background before I was at Giant Spoon, and I'd be fascinated in these pitches because you could have put the most amazing creative work in front of clients, and then it gets to somebody in the back room. It's like going to buy a car, to go back to your analogy. It's like they go and make the deal in the back room. It's like that has nothing to do with the features, you know? And so I think it's fascinating, and we've created tools to feed into that efficiency, and then came the rise of programmatic. Now you've got CMOs and brand executives walking into our agency saying, I'm not getting creative thinking where I currently am.
Well,
You know, and so I think that there needs to be this real evaluation, and to your point, what do we value?
Yeah.
And granted, for some clients there may need to be a heavier mix
it's a lot
of one
performance,
versus the other, but that doesn't mean that we need to strip creative thinking away to go down to the bottom dollar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to spend time educating some of our clients about, like, again, we're not the cheapest rate card out there, but we work very fast. We have fully retained teams, but if you have a fully retained team, they can move much faster. So you can it's just a different way of looking at the math. You know, somebody might need 10 weeks to do what we can do in 5 or 6. So it's not all. It's unfortunate that it kind of boils down often to what are your rates, and that's where we start negotiating, because we're like, that has nothing to do with it necessarily. Like, we're going to get this thing done faster and with 5 people and not a team of 15.
And I think that as agencies, is comfortable being okay with saying, and this isn't a fit.
Yeah.
If you're looking to see how much money I'm putting in the programmatic column, like, we're in the wrong conversation.
Well, I think on the agency side, it's the issue with, well, why are all these junior people on my account? Well, you drove the rate card down, you know, or working with the emerging agency teams are 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, but you're working with the best in the business, and they're not going to drop their rate down below like $250 an hour for you for some blended rate. Like, these guys are expensive, and you pay for it, and you get it.
I love your website where it says less people, more senior people.
Yeah.
I really love it because I think that says something. I like that. I don't know. We looked at that.
They stole it. I saw it in your presentation.
No, we did not.
No, I mean, we're like if you have senior people, they are putting more value into the project. So
It's expensive.
Yeah, hiring us back in the day when it was only 5 partners was your best investment ever, because you were gonna get 5 partners only working on your project. But ship has sailed, unfortunately.
But I think it's, I'd also caution against like false equivalencies, right?
Yeah.
I don't think senior people always get you the best work. I don't
No,
think
it's not.
Right.
very efficient buys always lead to shitty creative. Pardon my French. But I just think
That's
that there's some context around all of that is worth debating and worth discussing.
Yeah, which is where it's interesting from a staffing perspective. When you talk about chemistry, I've been in many pitches where there's like the A team at some of the big agencies, and they're in every pitch. And I think clients have gotten a little bit smarter, like, no, but seriously, who am I going to meet after this is over? And they're like, these people, like, this is not happening.
Right.
They're all from Europe.
And I think it's really smart to, it's always the guy that comes in from Hong Kong that, it's interesting. But I think from a staffing perspective, what you're saying is we've also got into this thing of, and this is from some of the bigger agencies, of pulling somebody from each of the different siloed departments. And I think what some of the newer models and younger agencies that aren't tied to that legacy siloed practice are thinking, like, when I'm staffing for a business, I'm not thinking, who's my digital person, who's my strategy person, I'm thinking, who's the person that has passion about retail?
Yeah.
Who's the guy who's dealing art on the side on the weekends? Like, those are the people that mesh with the clients and understand. We have a client coming in, and it might just have to do with your ethnicity or where you're from, and there's that instant connection. And I might not know everything about your brand, but it's going to take it to a deeper level. And so I think that staffing for the needs of the client versus what best representation of your portfolios is an interesting one.
Okay. Where's Amanda? Looking for Amanda.
Corner. She's over there.
Oh, how am I on time?
She's like, all right, you've got 5 more minutes before you want to.
I could just sit and talk all night. So I just wanted to time check. Thank you. So let's end on positioning. So we all come from different worlds. We're not competing with each other, but as the proliferation of so many different agencies, people saying they can do everything, how do we position ourselves to kind of stand out from the crowd? And if you're a smaller agency, how do you get recognized?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you want to start? Okay.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna maybe put Giant Spoon on top because you're
sure.
a newer agency.
Yeah, so like I said, Giant Spoon's found on the principle of being an idea-driven agency, and it's the intersection of everything from culture, technology, media strategy. It's really kind of what we envision, and I never use this phrase, agency of the future. It's really being equipped to bring full service back to the table, and knowing what your strengths are based on what your client needs may be. We talk a lot about our biggest asset, I say, is our human capital. Our IP and the ability to bring a certain sort of critical thinking, injecting that back into things like media, or what clients are asking for.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting when you start saying, is my competition another small media agency, or is my competition a consultant agency? You know, and where does that play? So we talk a lot about, in one of the positioning statements I always say is, we're a consultancy that executes. We're thinking about the business needs of our client, not just the campaign brief on the table.
Yeah.
And so when you can bring value in the form of not just the best rates or the best creative, but intelligence, and arming your client with the ability to make decisions that might not have anything to do with the marketing project on the table, that's where relationships tend to flourish. And I think by giving before you get, those people turn into friends. And when they leave and they move on to other places, and they remember that. And so we're big on giving, only to a certain extent, right?
Positioning is so hard. You know, like I do spend some time consulting with agencies, you know, it's kind of like a chameleon state right now. I feel like everyone's changing and shifting into what they think the client wants to hear.
Yeah.
The client can like see that. They understand what's changing. They understand that, and they know that you can't do everything. But the minute you kind of hone it, so like, what's the one unique thing that you do, right? That's really hard to figure out on your own. And mainly, I think it's hard for agencies because they don't want to let go of everything else. They feel like if you just kind of say like, we kick ass, our sweet spot is this, which doesn't have to be a thing. It could be a category, it could be a demographic, it could be all these different things. Then they're really nervous that they're going to like, oh my God, but what if someone wants to come hire us for this other thing that we kind of still do? We got to make sure that's all in the positioning. I'm like, they'll still hire you for that. But I think it's letting go of this feeling that if you're not putting everything like the kitchen sink into your offering, you can still do those things.
Yeah.
But you have to find that, you know, like we're an X blah 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 agency, we rock at boom. Like what is that thing that everyone will know what you do and be like really confident in walking to a room and saying that. Yeah. I don't know, because I hear a lot of like, we are an experience company and we connect everything in the consumer journey. I don't know what the hell that means. I'm pretty sure no one really does that, to be honest. It's impossible unless you're doing full attribution.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just like figure out that one magical thing that, you know, can stick with people and they remember it. And then they're like, oh, I know who to call for this. Those guys.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard for big agencies, I think, you know, because we do offer a big suite of services, and we have experts and best in class, I would say, in a lot of those services. I think that at Ogilvy, one of the things that I'm the most proud of is that I don't think there's another network agency that understands who they are better. And the more we commit to those values, remind ourselves of those values, and are proud of those values, the better we just do. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the RFPs or the opportunities that we either receive or go after, and making sure they're the right fit. Because that takes the pressure off of trying to prove yourself, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, what is that one thing we have to say because this is different than that? And so but you don't, bless you, we don't have to necessarily, bless you, we don't necessarily have to rely and think so hard about that when we feel like it's a good fit. When we feel like that is a problem, there's no one better to solve but us. And we have to focus less on all of the other stuff and just focus on what we're there to do.
I think that's a really good point. We've had moments where we've, for example, had one of the, you can guess who they might be, but a global athletic company come to us with a project. And as much as we really wanted to go after it, we made the collective decision not to do it because it wasn't within our core set of capabilities. And we could have stretched and we could have like found someone in 2 weeks, which to staff the project we just kind of don't do. And it was really hard, it's really hard as a company to say like, we're going to turn down a piece of business that on paper looks magical. But if it's not the right fit, it's going to cause problems later. It's not going to be a good case study. The client will be upset and they won't hire you to do more work. So it's really important to kind of know, to your point, know what you're best at and own those projects. And that's going to ultimately long-term get you more success.
I think what's fascinating though about when you're speaking about big companies is you're starting to watch the morphing of the big guys who are recognized, like you're seeing some of these creative shops now opening up media practices. And understanding that the business is changing, and if we've reached capacity here, where do we need to diversify our business?
Yeah.
And now who are those guys competing with? It might not be the big shops, and so there's this complete fragmentation and shakeup happening where you've got traditional creative, traditional media, and what are these spaces in between that people need to start filling and thinking about strategically?
But the positioning issue is huge because when you're seeing a pitch that's like, you know, an Ogilvy, and then a 30-person shop, and a 5-person shop, and then for some reason like a software company, and a this and a that. It just means like client does not understand. Well, they probably don't understand their ask, but they just don't understand the landscape, which I think is the biggest thing. It's like it's not fair to put a giant company up against a small company. You know, from my perspective, I just think that it's not even playing field. And I do think one thing you should always ask is who am I up against, and if they don't tell you, you should not be pitching the work.
That's a hard thing to, that's a hard thing to push back on.
I think
we never did it at Droga. We wouldn't pitch the work.
From a client standpoint, I feel like we're not shy about sharing who's in the bid pool or in the bid pool. And maybe this is my agency background speaking, but you should know.
Yeah, you should know.
I think a lot of it, and I still feel a little bit like I have my agency hat on. A lot of agencies need to do some soul searching and just accept who they are, or decide that they're changing and embrace that change and lean into it. But it's not believable to think that you're going to have a one-stop shop. I mean, in most contexts, perhaps an Ogilvy has enough depth in its different disciplines to be quite excellent at all of them. I'm not sure, but I think from our standpoint, again, context and the ask and the need is paramount. You know, and sometimes an agency is the right agency tomorrow, but they weren't the right agency yesterday because the need that we had was slightly different. I think with so many shops out there, if you want to spend the time and get to a depth and a level of craft in anything that you're doing, like you're not starved for options. You just need to be sort of careful in your approach and really define the ask. I agree with Lindsay that if we as clients are doing a good job, there should be very few instances where we have a giant company pitching against a 20-person shop. I just think unless you're looking for diversity in thinking, it creates, I think, complications for you, to be quite honest, in what you get back. So I think positioning is tricky. I think because the landscape is changing so much, it will definitely evolve. I don't think it's a finite point that any agency can kind of settle on. But the key to it in my mind, and the key to being memorable to a brand, is you being honest about yourself and what you really sort of enjoy doing, what you have as a core competency, and what you present.
So I saw my 5-minute warning. I'm going to do a quick fire final question for everyone. So just going from positioning for your company, let's talk about positioning yourself as a new business professional or whatever you're doing in your role. So I am admittedly not a Twitter user. My Instagram is private. I don't use Facebook. I really don't have a social media presence.
Francis, you are dead to me.
I want to know, because I know that I evaluate brands based on their social profile. I'm assuming brands are evaluating my agency based on our social profile. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. But what about individual social profiles? Is that something we should all be worried about? Do I need a personal brand to be successful as a new business professional? Hopefully the answer is maybe, but let's see.
I think that you need to represent your brand as a person that is looking to grow in their career. I don't necessarily think that my investment in my social presence is going to advance Ogilvy or my win rate or that. No, I don't. I think we rely on the brand itself, Ogilvy. I actually think that the more I'm in the background and orchestrating a beautiful pitch with the people that I'm actually selling, the better. I think that if that's happening, I'm doing my job very well. So I would invest in my brand only for Simone and my career, not as someone that's looking for success for the agency.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I'm 3 months in, and this might change. But I don't remember ever looking at the personal profile of someone who was coming in to, you know.
Everyone's looking at you, by the way. We have all
I
this
didn't look at your social.
I've looked at, I've looked at LinkedIn maybe.
Yeah,
but
LinkedIn, I feel like
but
you have to be on
I
LinkedIn.
love me some LinkedIn.
I know.
Yeah, we have.
Thank God for LinkedIn.
Maybe this is a little bit of a dissenting thing. You know, I think some of the people that we work with at Giant Spoon are some of the most fascinating 20-somethings that live in this slashy culture. And so during the day, they bring their creativity and ideas from stuff that they borrowed from the night before, whether they're curating, you know, shows, they're theater geeks, they're, you know, entrepreneurs with a side hustle. And I think you can learn a lot by Giant Spoon, certainly from our own social handles, but by investigating the ones that are maybe public facing from the agency. We're a small shop, we're roughly 50 people, 25 here in New York, 25 in LA, and if you really want to get to know those folks, their job is their passion. That's why they're at Giant Spoon.
Yeah.
This is not something that is a stopover on a journey. These are people that are truly passionate about the industry. And I think you'll see that maybe not in a direct, you know, pickup from Ad Age, but certainly in terms of how they're digesting the news and how they're interpreting that and what they're putting out there. So it's interesting. I mean, you know, you see both sides of it. I wouldn't say that it's, you know, one-stop shop in terms of getting to know the full side of you. You definitely get to know a lot of me, but I think it's interesting to see how you can use that to your advantage if a client does take a look.
Yeah.
And they want to understand value and you know.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I have my own company, and so a lot of like my voice or my opinion is why someone selects to hire me, and so I put out a lot of thought leadership, and I write a lot of things and send them to my client and clients and future clients and try to add value. So I think LinkedIn is great. I think creating your own thought leadership is amazing. I think the one thing that new business people could do for their clients is not necessarily social, but is to look at the existing clients that you already have and think about how you're servicing them with thought leadership. Organize, you know, you might have one tiny slice of the millions of dollars they're spending, and organize something to go and speak with them and have a workshop that's, you know, unpaid, whatever. It's just part of your relationship to help them grow and share different things. I think new business should be the spearheading behind that with the existing clients that you have. But I use LinkedIn. I mean, my Instagram is all about work. It's my personal life, but I get a lot of, like, my clients follow me, and a lot of them kind of are like interested in what we're doing, and so I post a lot of stuff. Works as a small business. So. I did, see? Yeah.
I think we're out of time, but we're going to do questions. So there's no mic. We're just going to raise our hands, and I'll try to be fair. Or play nice. I'll be as fair as I can about. Okay.
Thank you guys so much for being here. You had talked a little bit earlier about that shift from the agency of record model over to a project-by-project basis. And it sounds like there's a lot of value that comes with that, right? You get to see fresh ideas, you can kind of tailor the work that they're doing. On the other side, I guess, it also seems like there's a little bit of a risk of losing institutional knowledge. You know, partners that have been with you for a long time who really don't need to be ramped up with every new project. Do you think there's a risk of that trend swinging too far in the other direction?
It's a good question. I think we're not as concerned about that because we have people on the brand side who are really owning a lot of that institutional knowledge and responsible for sort of guarding it and passing it on through different agency relationships, I suppose. But I will say, starting a relationship is a pain. It's tough. We don't want to do it. So we prefer to have the same partners around the table who are continuously adding value to what we do. I think when we don't see that, I think what you're finding with brands now is that they're more apt to change because there are so many partners. And I think the process of ramping someone up or onboarding them on your brand because you have this institutional knowledge on your end isn't as cumbersome. So the onus is on that relationship to continue to yield value, and as long as it does that, I know we are personally very happy to have partners around the table who make us better.
Yeah, I think it's about making some form of commitment in the relationship. So, I mean, you know, as heads of production before, it doesn't really matter if you call it a project or retainer. I'm just putting numbers together and we're getting to a bottom line. I don't care how you structure it. I think projects make it feel more like a deliverable, and I like that. So retainer feels a little bit looser sometimes, just the language. But if you're going to work with someone and they're going to drive a big piece of your business for a large brand, like make a year-long commitment to them and have your outs and whatnot. But you could still call it a project or a scope of work or not. I mean, I would prefer not to be paid on retainer sometimes because then I'm not submitting all my hours. I got a flat rate and I can make money off that however I want. Just be honest, you know, I mean, that's how you're pricing your work. Retainers are accountable in a different way if you're getting crafty. But I think too much dating, I mean, I love the notion of like workshops and getting ideas from people and bringing people around the table, but too much dating is really dangerous because you just aren't bringing the mistakes along with you, right? You need to like figure out what's not working, and it's not just like, oh, non-committal, moving on. We're not going to go to counseling. I don't know.
Yeah, I would just add, you know,
Not anti-AOR. Yeah.
if there's anything the past few months have taught us, it's to beware of your echo chamber. And I think it's interesting when you talk about like institutional relationships and legacy partnerships that you find yourself sometimes in this place of complacency where you're not pushing yourselves or quite frankly your clients to think differently. And so as just the industry, I think we need to be aware of making sure we're not speaking to ourselves in a continuous loop because that totally restricts their creativity. And I think competition from new agencies is a good thing. Because it actually forces us to defend that legacy and at the same time push ourselves to new creative thinking. So,
we talked a lot about moving towards project work and knowing your competitive set. So my question is, do you foresee having to work in collaboration with other agencies more in the future? Is that going to be part of the landscape as Giant Spoon is going to be partnered with this agency? And if that's the case, should we be thinking about the type of agencies we want to be aligning with?
it's a great question. It's one we are asking ourselves a lot right now. Giant Spoon's a little bit over 3 years old, and we're growing into new disciplines. And so we're paying attention to what is hot in the market and why. You're seeing emergence. You know, I remember watching one of the bigger holding companies say, or relatively new holding companies say, we're going to launch an AI agency only. You know, and say, okay, that's interesting. And you know, at that same time, does that serve a benefit if you don't have that need in house? Maybe. But one thing I'll tell you, we've gotten real comfortable with real quick as a emerging shop is there's a lot of agencies around the table, and it behooves you to find, you talk about knowing your role and what those agencies can rely on you on for, as opposed to trying to carve out, outside of your swim lane. It behooves us to all think about the relationships alongside one another, because when you foster those relationships versus causing rifts just based on ego, competition, whatever the case may be, the work's going to suffer. And I think when you forge strategic partnerships, those are partners that when they move on to the next project with a different client, they're going to be calling you.
Yeah.
So we try to celebrate those as best we can and know how we can bring value to the table.
Come with the partners you already want to work with, like come to the table with, I like to work with these people. I think a lot of it, like we've all probably sat in this IMC situation where everyone's sitting around the table and we're all nodding and yeah, that sounds great, and then everyone goes to the client afterwards and talks behind their back and is like, we could do that better or whatever. I think it's the role of the client to orchestrate these partnerships, because you could hire, it's like an interior design, I mean, you could get all the best things and put them in a room, but if you don't really know how to like match them together and get them to work, then what's the point? You put top smart people all together And sometimes you shouldn't, maybe you're just putting, you know, all of your favorite things together and they just don't work.
Right.
So I think orchestration, and I think you're going to see from brands a lot of orchestration happening and how they do that, and transparency in scopes. I mean, we just negotiated your scope with the creative agency and we shared them because it's like, you're going to have crossover here and here, and these things you both kind of do, and maybe we should think about how that's going to work together. Maybe we make shared production budgets that media and creative can both pull from, but have to sit together with the client and figure out what the best way to get something done is, especially when media is a part. So it's the role, I think, of the brand to really make those relationships and partnerships work, and they just haven't played that part. I haven't experienced on the agency side really well.
And that transparency is key, because if you're showing up to the table trying to sort your roles amongst yourself, that's like the Hunger Games.
You don't know the scope.
It's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable as
So
the
it's like,
agency
it's on the
to be there.
table now, here's what are we going to do, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I think that's key.
I think you had a question?
Yeah, so like, if you ever had a client who's a kind of like client compelled kind of thing, where you're like, okay, this really, they're giving us cross orders, and it's not really worth it anymore. Like how, like say that's the situation, if you've ever like experienced that, how do you kind of leave it nicely? Or like what did you do as a fire
How do you fire clients?
Or the reverse, you know?
Yes. Okay. This one.
I mean, I think when it comes time to firing a client or breaking up, it's like most breakups, like it's really not working out for both of you, and maybe the other one isn't willing to accept that yet, but
It's not you, it's me.
I think it ultimately, like for us, when we've, it's, I think I can say this, it's only happened once. I'm not gonna say the client, but it was more like they were taking advantage of our people. And when you get to that point, like there's no question, like you're gonna break up with them. Like, it's like in your own personal life, like you always get to a point where like, I can't do this anymore. So I think it makes it easier when you are very clear with yourself about what are my limits. And clearly clients are gonna get the most value they can out of their agency partners, but if they're becoming kind of abusive towards you or it's not working out, like you just have to know that this isn't right for you, and it's gonna be fine. And your poor account person's gonna have to do it. But that's their job. They're account
Best
people.
day of their life.
Best day of their life. But
I'm actually curious about this. How often have you guys fired clients?
I haven't personally, but I've been at agencies that have fired clients
Yeah,
before.
my whole, I mean,
Yeah.
I
worked
could
in
bring in a
agencies
client and
for-
so let someone else fire them.
It's like they're not.
Yeah, it's not our
they're
problem,
not
it's
accepting the
new
work,
business
people. Yeah.
or they're pushing for so many reviews, and you're like coming to a breaking point, and the money just isn't worth it anymore. But it's hard. It's hard if you're a small shop.
Yeah.
That's really hard because now you're just
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do after this? Do I have to cut employees? And what does this
Yeah.
mean? So it's such a tough call.
I also think at the surface level, and this may just be because I'm Italian from New Jersey, but I think that you have to anticipate the why. Why is a client scraping and acting in this way? Why? What is the tension that all of a sudden? Because a lot of those situations, like you can get blindsided by a pivot in direction, and clients are frustrated. Oftentimes, you find it's maybe management has changed. Maybe earnings are down. It may not be things specific to what you're working on in the day-to-day, but understanding the bigger business implications of what that marketing department is doing, and figuring out ways, are there other services that I can help mitigate this with? Are there other people bringing this to the table to alleviate it? Should we be changing our model? I think before you're so quick to break up, I mean, obviously abuse is a different thing, but I think anticipating, the bigger situation. I mean, I've worked with some clients that I'm like, what are you doing this for? You're miserable. And then you find out that, there's been a executive change where the guy just doesn't believe in the shit that he's been doing for the last 5 years. And so how do you arm him with the right, support to go in and make a case and have his back or her back?
How many times, though, have either the agency or the client actually been very surprised that they've been fired?
Yeah. To be honest with
You
you,
know, it's like a breakup.
They're
You
just
just-
pushing, they're pushing,
you
they're
saw
I
it
think
coming.
one thing that we would do in one of my previous agencies is we would have a conversation up front about the things that we think could lead to issues down the line. it's almost like a premarital sort of counseling. Where you sit, because to your point, you often know. You know the things that are going to cause the issues. So you sit, you have a conversation about them, and then you establish protocol for how you're going to manage that. Because to your point, clients rarely call you in the middle of the night and say you're fired. I mean, something leads up to that point.
Yeah.
So getting ahead of it, having that conversation up front, and then having an established forum where you can discuss and hopefully mitigate that is something that was pretty successful.
And you see this a lot in the big agencies, and I know from experience and seeing it, it's like a lot of times senior management, like you get in a rhythm and you take your eye off the ball. And it might not even be internal, but somebody's grabbing at that business. I don't care, like to your point, it could be a tech company, it could be another agency, it could be whoever. And so what oftentimes might not even be relative, you're not paying attention to your business. You get comfortable and complacent. And clients, this is a service business. And so, you know, while you might be putting out great work, if you're not understanding where your client is from a day to day, we're not really doing our jobs. And so, you know, you gotta protect your house. And I think that, you know, client service, it's funny on the media side, I've always been astounded that on the creative side, you have account teams. And the fascinating thing on the media side, and you usually touch, you know, you have your production external resources that you use to produce your work. But on the media side, you're talking to other agencies, you're talking to media vendors, you're talking to clients, you know, all of these different players, and there's no account teams in media houses. Why? There's so many relationships that need to be brokered and protected, and I just think it's a function that media agencies miss all too often. So.
Time's up. Well, we just went full circle from hire to fire, so that's really everything you need to know to be successful in new business in 2017. So thank you so much for coming. There's more wine. So stick around if you want to mingle a bit longer. We'd love to stay and chat. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, guys.